When I joined, I was one of the first people in New York, and I think it was maybe there were like 120 people in the US. And by the time I left, we had grown to, I want to say, over 500 or 600 people in the US, and we were acquired by Square for $29 billion. So that was one of the biggest acquisitions of recent history, I think, which is crazy. Finding if you can do some sort of like a tentpole holiday that you can really stick to. So for Afterpay, we actually created a holiday for Afterpay. It was called Afterpay Day, where we encouraged all of our brands to run a sale essentially on that day for their customers, but only if they're paying and checking out with Afterpay. It worked really, really well, driving conversions and driving signups. I would just start with those free or cheap channels, the like owned channels, if you will. Email marketing content, blogs, gated content, maybe some blog swaps with partners, and see what actually is delivering ROI there.
Yulia, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to chat all things B2B and B2C marketing today. Would love if you could give the audience just a really brief background into your experience as a marketing leader. I know you spent a lot of time at some really interesting companies and would love to contextualize that for the audience.
Yeah, definitely. I started in marketing over a decade ago. Really had an interesting start. I worked at a PR agency. I studied PR in college, and that was kind of the only path that was highlighted for me, was going into an agency and working for one of those like big Weber Shandwick guys. And I started there. And soon after, actually, I worked on the B2B side of things. So I had a lot of opportunity to work with tech leaders and founders who were just starting out in their journey on starting a company, and I was helping them with a lot of like messaging and positioning and all that. So that was really interesting to me, and I always thought that maybe I would end up working in one of the companies. So I ended up making the switch and went in-house and have worked in tech startups ever since.
That's awesome. And I know that there are a few different areas that you focus on within the lens of marketing more broadly. Obviously, this podcast is focused more on optimization from a marketing spend perspective. How do we take the input that is marketing spend and then translate it into revenue? With that as the lens, can you talk a little bit about some of the areas that you focus on that lead to revenue growth?
Definitely. I would say that I am a demand gen marketer, where I really heavily leaning into the performance side of things, where everything that I do has to somehow equal an ROI, even if I don't have a lot of budget. So I've always worked at tech startups, and that meant like pretty early stage, like anywhere from C to C, and didn't have a lot of budget to play with, but always had to figure out ways to drive MQLs and demos, and ultimately have those convert into customers somehow. So have some experience that I'll dig into later about just the types of things that we've done, all the campaigns that we've tried and tested without a budget, where now that we have a little bit of a budget, like where does that money go and how are we optimizing that? But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is a unique skill set that one can develop by working for smaller startups or high growth startups with less budget to manage, because you have to be very careful about how you allocate those dollars. And then when you're operating at scale, you can kind of afford to make some more mistakes as long as the ship is kind of sailing in the right direction, because you're more diversified. So that's definitely makes sense. We'll talk a little bit about some of your experience in at different brands today. The first that I wanted to start with is Afterpay, which a lot of folks know as a buy now, pay later solution that works with a bunch of large brands. Can you just give an introduction into what Afterpay is and what your roles and responsibilities were while working for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you just mentioned Afterpay is a buy now, pay later solution. They really is a it's a company that works with brands in the e-commerce world to allow their customers to buy something now and pay for it over time via installments. So very simplified financing essentially. We used to call it the new layaway, if you will. But it's a company that's out of Australia. It was huge there and came over to the US a few years ago. And I was one of the first marketers in the US to help kind of stand up the partner marketing function.
And what does standing up a profitable partner marketing function look like and entail?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I felt like it was interesting because we had the support of this bigger company in Australia, so they've already had a lot of success there. So it was sort of we had this playbook that we could replicate in the US, but then it was still a new market and it was still treated as like more of a startup here in the US. So it was still learning and iterating and testing. So, actually, funny anecdote is that I was hired as a sales marketing manager, which I was supposed to really just partner with the sales team to help them more of like the attracting brands and like creating like case studies and one pagers and decks like that. But then soon into my role, they're like, oh, no, we actually don't have a problem with converting brands into customers. What we really want to focus on is helping them go to market in the right way where we're actually reaching their customers that we want to use our product. So my role shifted within like a month or so from sales marketing role to this partner marketing role, where I was more post purchase, partnering with our top B2B or sorry, top brands like Steve Madden, Ulta Beauty, Estee Lauder, to help them go to market with buy now, pay later. Meaning, um, once they launched or once they signed the contract to partner with us, I would then be added to their team, their success team, if you will. And I would serve as an internal consultant of like sharing the best practices of actually how to go to market with Afterpay. Like, what are the things that they need to do from their end, such as activating email, influencers, paid social, um, brand campaigns, etc., and then all the things that we can do internally to support that. So it was a really cool role that totally changed from like when I started to when I was leaving, but it was a really cool learning experience.
Yeah, partner marketing is not a category of marketing I'm as familiar with, but if I look at it from the lens of marketing as a revenue generating activity, it is this like collaborative effort that the input that you put in of like the effort to grow the relationship and drive revenue for them has the mutual benefit of driving revenue for Afterpay and the organization. What I guess maybe just to start, you kind of mentioned there was a playbook that you replicated. What are some components of that playbook that might be interesting for an audience that might be thinking about partner marketing to leverage?
Yeah, so I actually will mention that partner marketing, I think, is a term that's different from company to company. At Afterpay, we called it partner marketing, but I learned that in other companies, like my current company, Treet, partner marketing is very different. It's actually partnering with other tech companies rather than the end like customer. So depending on where you are, it could be called co-marketing, which probably is a better term, but yeah, what that really entailed was coming up with a strategy of like what are some of your best channels. So once we brought on a big client, I would then sit down with their marketing team and really dig in like what has been working for you to attract new customers to date, what are some of your most successful channels, and how can we plug into that messaging kind of seamlessly. So of course at launch that was around announcing availability of buy now pay later, because the whole thing about buy now pay later is it was to allow customers to maybe even afford something more expensive because they're not paying for it all at once, or maybe afford a bigger basket size. So it was definitely a benefit for the brand to be able to promote this. So the initial strategy would be like, okay, what are some of the things that you're doing right now in marketing? How can we let your customers know that Afterpay is now available? A lot of the brands that we worked with, depending on size and how they target, um, they would work with influencers. They probably have a lot of influencers that they know and trust already, and they can like see this messaging. Let your audience know that you can now buy now pay later. Use email to announce this availability of our product as well, and do sometimes we can do even big brand campaigns. If the brand does have a big co-marketing budget, we can do something real big, like take over Times Square and every single screen there with this messaging, or do like a runway show. So the sky was the limit at Afterpay, and it was really, really fun.
And let me ask, so if we think about partner marketing, co-marketing, and optimizing that budget, there's the budget on Afterpay's end in order to deploy capital to then drive revenue and more Afterpay acquisition. And then there's like there's a marketing budget on the other end, on Steve Madden's end, to drive acquisition. From Afterpay's side, how did you actually like prioritize and identify opportunities based on impact? How did you think about like, okay, maybe the total sum of this marketing budget between us and them is large enough that warrants a lot of revenue for us versus something else? How did you go and think about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. So the biggest thing that we measured with my team, essentially, it was about share of cart. So how many people are checking out with Afterpay versus other payment options on site. So for example, if you're Ulta and you take PayPal, you take Afterpay, you take Amex, like, well, how many people are actually choosing Afterpay? And that was our North Star. That was what we were measuring. So for us, it wasn't just like this one campaign and then you're successful. You have to continue marketing the program over and over again. And it was really just getting the brands aligned with this idea that you have to continuously promote the partnership in various ways that like keep people top of mind. So I think one of the cool things about Afterpay was that once we acquired a customer, like when somebody tries Afterpay for the first time, they actually continue using it pretty much. There's not a lot of like they know that it's available and they usually really like it. But it was that first kind of barrier to entry because you do have to put in a lot of your information and select that as a new payment channel over something that you may already be super familiar with. So it was a lot of educational components to it. It was a lot of you know, promoting things like, oh, we don't do credit checks, or like it won't hurt you if you don't pay us back, or things like that. They're like, okay, it's all right. And we have to get the brand on board with continuously messaging this as well. And as you can imagine, the brands have a ton on their plate. There's so many promotions. There's Christmas that they start planning for in July. There's there's so many holidays, Black Friday, and they just don't really have a lot of opportunity to fit in additional marketing messaging. So a lot what was on my plate with them was like, all right, let's figure out these like key pillars where we can work on together. Like maybe it's like September and we'll do something around New York Fashion Week, or maybe it was I don't know, beginning of summer, because we can do some sort of campaign around um, or like end of summer, that we can do some sort of campaign around like school, back to school shopping, when people are spending more, probably more than they would other times. So it was really interesting to be able to like identify these buckets of opportunities essentially, and this is like where we commit to doing something together, because it was unrealistic to say that the brands are just going to be talking about us all the time.
Right. That's really smart. The fact that you're looking for like pulsing times of higher volume and then capturing that demand. And there's some level of education required with like any new tool, right? That you have to work into your marketing strategy. Let me ask a very pointed question. You mentioned a couple of the kind of categories that you were leveraging to market this product before. Can you kind of restate if you had to bucket it into a few large categories, what were the channels or areas that you tested, and like what was the most effective from what you had tested?
For some of the bigger clients that had a larger co-marketing allocation, we were able to do some really big branding campaigns, and those were a little tricky to track because brand marketing is just trickier to track. There's not always that one-to-one ROI immediately, but it does end up working really well. So, for example, one of the things that we've done, or like one bucket, was just like these in-person activations, whether it was like a Times Square takeover of different all the screens kind of, or sponsoring a fashion show for one of our brands, just kind of a buzzy thing that we were able to then take the content for and uh, share that across other channels. So I'd say that worked really well for some of the bigger clients that already had like a lot of really great brand recognition. And then for some of the smaller brands that rely heavily on paid marketing, they found a lot of success with adding buy now, pay later messaging into their already existing campaign. So it would be something like, you know, this item is $100, but it's only $25, technically, because you can pay in 4 installments, kind of thing. So really pushing this messaging and like focusing on this girl math, essentially, of being like, hey, you don't have to pay for it all now. It's actually only $25 now. So a lot of our clients added that to their paid campaigns and did a lot of like A/B testing to see if that would work. So that was one of the route. And then another one was just like product marketing, just fighting to be on their PDP page, like product page, right under the price. It's just, again, the same messaging of like, this is $100, but it's actually only 25 if you buy right now and then pay it over time. We found really great success with companies that added Afterpay to PDP versus those who didn't.
Sure. And it helps that it's a very simple and easy to understand value prop relatively as well. And myself working for a credit building app, there is often a lot of education we have to do as well when it comes to financial and loan products. The fact that there's not a hard credit check, or in our case, that we're only reporting positive payments in some of our products, because some people might think I have a negative payment and you're going to take that and it's going to impact my credit. So there's some educational, there's an education piece there as well. Um, so for marketers or entrepreneurs or startup founders that might be doing co-marketing or partnership marketing for the first time, what would you say are a kind of like a couple of your top tips or tricks, things that you've learned as a as a result of spending this time at Afterpay and now Treat?
I would say just being flexible to whatever customer, and when I say customer, I mean a brand, to what they're already doing, being sensitive to what works for them. I don't think that there is a one plan that works across the board. um, for one brand in e-commerce, they may be killing it in paid advertisements, and the other one may not be getting any success there. So it's just like finding what is that one or two place, like what are those placements where you can plug in that's already working for them, where you could just easily provide messaging and just go and kind of like stack on top of that and go with that, rather than trying to carve out a whole new avenue or niche, and creating extra work for the partner. I think that brands are much more open to marketing you and helping you get the message across if you're not giving them too much extra work. If you're just like providing a cookie cutter, like kind of book, like here are the examples, here's all you need, here are the assets, here is the verbiage, like just add us to what you're already doing, and let's see what the results are. I think that would be my first advice there. And then the second one I haven't touched on yet, but just finding if you can do some sort of like a tentpole holiday that you can really stick to. So for Afterpay, we actually created a holiday for Afterpay. It was called Afterpay Day, where I think it was 2 or 3 times a year, where there's a specific day where we encouraged all of our brands to run a sale essentially on that day for their customers, but only if they're paying and checking out with Afterpay. And that, obviously worked really, really well, driving conversions and driving signups, because on that one day, say something is usually $100, but they're writing a 20% off sale only if you pay for it via Afterpay. That gives you a lot more of an incentive to actually go ahead and sign up. And having that, I think maybe it started only doing once a year and then twice a year. And I think by the time I left, it was maybe seasonally, but definitely something that worked really well to like increase that share of cart and drive a lot of conversions. And then for Treet, and I'll intro Treet a bit later, but what we're doing now is we are working on second Earth Month and National Secondhand Wardrobe Day, because we are like the sustainability solution that works with brands to help them launch into resale. So we identified these 2 months, like April Earth Month and then August National Secondhand Wardrobe Month, where we are really like clinging to and are encouraging our brands to participate with us.
That's awesome. Yeah, really, really excellent insights. I think about how, sometimes we can think about like our marketing efforts as being very linear and we're just doing the same thing over time. And if you think about your time spent and you know that you're going to have these like tent pole moments that are going to result in more revenue, better conversion rate, it's et cetera, you can spend more of your time planning up to that day. So like it might be a 1 weekend long event that you spend 6 months on that you're not kind of seeing the results for, and then all at once you see the results. But it's okay because like it's like a win-win overall, with After Payday, are you able to share kind of like what type of revenue that just one event was driving for Afterpay?
Honestly, I can't even remember. But it was, I think actually one of our brands, we had like $1 million day for one of our smaller brands, which was pretty crazy. And that was one of my first brands that I worked with. And I remember that was huge. And I can't remember the others.
Yeah, it's always exciting too with co-marketing if you can help another business out and help them succeed, and then they're pretty pumped as well. Any other impactful lessons from your time at Afterpay? Maybe just to contextualize, I know that you were there for, almost 4 years. What was like the kind of size at which you joined and then where you left, maybe in terms of like headcount, revenue, et cetera? Would love to hear about just kind of like the growth that you experienced while there.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually only there for 2.5 years, but definitely feels like four more. It was really cool and probably once in a lifetime kind of growth spur that I experienced. I joined at the beginning of 2019, I believe, and where Afterpay was starting to be a household name here, kind of. It was like more people knew about it, but then COVID happened, and of course, for a lot of companies, COVID was not a good thing, but for Afterpay, it was an amazing thing because a lot of people had this disposable income, and then they also were able to buy now, pay later. So there was just like this boom of people starting to signing up, and we really grew super quickly. So when I joined, I was one of the first people in New York, and I think it was maybe there were like 120 people in the US. And by the time I left, we had grown to, I want to say, over 500 or 600 people in the US, and we were acquired by Square for $29 billion. So that was one of the biggest acquisitions of recent history, I think, which is crazy.
Amazing. And outside of partner marketing, did you touch any of their kind of demand gen budget or have exposure to kind of their demand gen media mix?
Not really. The teams are pretty siloed there, I would say. You kind of stayed in your lane. There's a lot of people. I mean, this was the biggest company I've ever worked with, and it was really crazy to me to be able to have so many people on the team and just other marketers there, and going from a small startup to such a bigger startup or tech company. I actually at first was having a lot of trouble just staying in my lane because I just wanted to do so many things. I had these ideas for email marketing and I was like, oh, sales marketing. And I think I could do this too. And then I'm like, no, like you have a job. Trust me, like you will be busy enough with that one role, which I was. But yeah, it was kind of, I was there. And of course, I collaborated with a lot of different marketers. I collaborated with our content team. I collaborated with our internal email marketing team because while we encouraged the brands to promote us and market Afterpay, we also did that to our growing customer base. So there's always this, um, not fight, but like ability to request placement in our newsletters for our brands. And yeah, it was interesting because I felt like I wanted to do so many different things and I was used to touching so many aspects of my marketing. And here I kind of was in this one partner marketing role. But luckily enough, where I did get to work with brands and still kind of advise them on all of these different channels. So it wasn't just that I wasn't doing it myself.
Um, I can that resonates with me greatly. Being at a startup that has grown over time and wanting to do more things and feeling like siloed, I do have to, and but it also makes sense that I have to stay in my lane. There's a reason why there are org charts and delineation and things like that. Um, we'll move on to Treat, but just before we do, maybe one question on that is any learnings from like org chart structuring and that type of thing from Afterpay, knowing that maybe that could be helpful for other B2B marketer leaders, right? That are thinking about how should I structure my team to optimize for revenue? Because it feels like, for example, the partner marketing function was so integral to like driving revenue and growth, right? Anything you could say there?
What I think worked really well is that the partner marketing team was closely partnered with our success team. So obviously there was like a client success team that was really responsible for growing the accounts. They were responsible for data and for analytics and for the day-to-day management of the accounts. And they were like amazing people to work with and they cared so much about growing each account and then upselling them and whatnot. But then every big account also had a partner marketing lead attached to them, and each partner marketer would have maybe 100 to 200 accounts, like they would be across a ton. And we were only supposed to be there kind of in and out, like in the beginning working closely on go to market strategy, then sort of back off until the whole um, thing is going and moving by itself, and then coming in during key moments when we had a marketing opportunity or if we had an idea to do something together, or like after paydays coming up, do you want to participate, things like that. But what we found is that marketers were high in demand, so the brands really wanted to work with marketers, and so there was a lot of at the beginning where we were able to just be like hands on a little bit and then hands off. By the time I left, I feel like I was on 200 calls a week with each brand because they always wanted to do something, which is awesome, but it was very unsustainable because they always just wanted to do some sort of marketing activity, or they had an idea, or they wanted to connect on something that they're doing, and or they wanted support from our marketing team. And I was able to provide that, but I felt like that was a little inefficient. And I'm not really sure what the solution might be, but I don't know if that's a good answer for you. But
Yeah. No, it is because it's just it kind of just goes into making sure that you're spending your time on the most high leverage, like high impact things. And at a certain point, you kind of think we're driving enough revenue from this opportunity and it makes sense to move on to other things. And there's like a marginal component to, hey, they're asking for all of these events and all this stuff, but is this really going to move the needle for them, or now is it just becoming like fun and not really high impact? So
oh, sorry. Well, I just wanted to add that there's also a time where you are sort of get grandfathered into an opportunity. So, as a company, you're always going up market and you're launching bigger and bigger companies. And so, what was considered an enterprise account 2.5 years ago It may no longer be an enterprise account now, but because you once got a marketer when you started, you're continuing to expect that same level of treatment. And then you just like and the account was just like never, they're just never coming off your plate. They're just added as we continue to add more brands, but like the brands just never really came off the plate. So it was it was an interesting thing to solve for. I think they have since solved it since I've left, but at the time I was like, oh, a lot.
I've experienced that with TikTok as one of the first marketers to start spending on that channel. At first, the reps were all over us, wanting to talk all the time, different testing ideas, giving me swag, added value left and right. And then, maybe you reduce spend for a couple quarters and now you're a small fish in a big pond, and you don't get that same level of focus and attention that you were getting before. But it is what it is. So I know we have a couple minutes left. We have about 10 minutes left. Want to talk about Treet a little bit. If you wouldn't mind just giving an introduction into what Treet is and what your role is at Treet.
So Treat is a branded resale platform. We work with direct to consumer fashion brands to help them go in launch into resale and own their secondhand markets. I'm the head of marketing. I'm the first marketing hire. I joined the company about 6 months in after inception. So and the company is about 3 years old. I've been there for about 2.5 and have been responsible for growing the entire marketing function to what it is now, building the foundation, and helping the company go from seed through our Series A that we just got.
Nice. And what does that marketing function look like today?
So we are primarily still focused on organic channels or kind of low spend channels. Series A definitely unlocks a bit of a budget, which is exciting, but we are still operating pretty leanly because we are testing and iterating, and we just don't want to make any mistakes. But we're starting to identify opportunities of places that have given us repeatable success for the past few years, and now are uh, beginning to spend more in those areas.
For a brand like Treat or other B2B brands that have very maybe niche or target market, how do you go about thinking about where to spend those first dollars and how to test those dollars when you have so few of them to spend and you have to make sure that they're like working as effectively as possible?
Yeah, I would just start with those free or cheap channels, the like owned channels, if you will. Email marketing content, blogs, gated content, maybe some blog swaps with partners, and see what actually is delivering ROI there. My goal is to drive demos, so I'm actually not even looking at driving MQL. So I'm going a step above and looking at actual demos like that are eligible and that are within our ICP. So for me, it's like, what are we doing now that is delivering those demos? And then, if we have the budget, can we use that to amplify that activity?
And maybe if I'm understanding correctly, and please like correct me if I'm wrong, but the takeaway that I'm getting is that it's smart to focus in a few in owned areas that are very niche, specific target audience. You can kind of understand and learn the messaging that's working, the content that's working, and also understand more about your audience. And then you can start to explore things like LinkedIn and other paid channels that have maybe less specific audience targeting capabilities and are also going to be more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a fun anecdote about that. So when I joined Treat, we actually didn't really have any marketing, so I was able to set up a lot of the functions from the ground up. So I launched our email through HubSpot. I started sending out newsletters to our very small subscriber list. Started writing blog posts, and not many people read them in the beginning, but
You're doing it all.
I'm doing it all. But What we learned from that is messaging and like the storytelling and kind of what is actually able to get that bite. So we are a branded resale platform, and we started because our mission is to help every item that is out there in terms of clothing item live its longest life through resale and allow it to be rehomed when it's no longer in use. And so we always thought about ourselves as like a sustainability tech. And initially, when we went to market, the messaging was really around sustainability, like be more sustainable through branded resale. Further your sustainability practices by adding this feature, and that worked for the first few brands that signed on with us that were already super, super sustainable, and they were already kind of doing the most. And this was the next logical step for them. So that was pretty low hanging fruit. But what we found is that it didn't really work that well for going up market and getting some of the bigger brands. And with via iterating on different messaging, we found that unfortunately, a lot of brands don't necessarily prioritize sustainability right now. What they are prioritizing is revenue, driving new customers, loyalty.
Shocking.
Shocking. So, by just listening to that and like doing some of that digging and research, all we did was really reposition our messaging. And instead of being sustainability forward, we were like, we help you drive revenue, acquire new customers, and build loyalty while being sustainable. Opened up a whole world of new possibilities for us. So that was definitely one learning that was essentially free because we own the messaging, but just really testing it out and seeing and what works and what doesn't makes a huge difference there.
There's also a very big difference between a primary value prop and a secondary value prop, and understanding what is going to lead to that initial interest is so key. I think about some of the work that I do at Self and promoting a credit building app, and there's a lot of different value props that we could promote, right? The most clear is you can increase your credit score by using these products, but then there are other benefits like no credit check required, or you can join millions of builders. And if you lead with some of those things, it's not going to drive the same conversion rate as when you lead with the thing that the people ultimately care the most about, and like what their dream outcome is and what they're looking to achieve. And so it feels like, from Treat's perspective, the story is, hey, we're going to make your life easier by making your brand more money, making you look better to your board and whoever else and stakeholders. And by the way, it's also sustainable, so you should feel good about that. Like, it's kind of like that little cherry on top that gets them, just like feeling good about the decision maybe.
Yeah, and what we found is that while a lot of the brand leaders feel the pressure to be more sustainable, they certainly understand that this is where the market is going, and this is what the consumers are demanding. They still are unlikely to implement something that doesn't help their bottom line. That is kind of the ultimate goal. So I think that they are just a lot more open to thinking about a sustainable solution if it also has these other amazing benefits, which is we do and we have had from the beginning. We just weren't leading with them, and now that we are, I think it's just gets the message across much better.
Awesome. Well, I could definitely talk to you longer about Treat and had some additional questions, but unfortunately, we have a hard stop. Thank you so much for taking the time, Yulia. And where can folks find out about you and learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Yulia Derdemezis. Find me there. I'm starting to post a lot more about just my experience marketing and about things that are happening at Treat and everything in between. Or you can email me at yulia.derdemezis@gmail.com, and look forward to chatting with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thank you.